Okay, so this is a secular argument against abortion. I think that abortion is one of the more important moral issues going on today. And quite frankly, abortion, as far as I'm concerned, is murder. Now, I am not a religious believer. I don't really believe in the notion of an immortal soul. I certainly don't believe in God. I do believe that we have some kind of spirit that is hard to pin down and to quantify, but like I say, I don't believe that it will transcend our mortal existence. And yet I do believe that abortion is wrong. I think it's murder, quite frankly. And this is an argument about that issue. It's my argument against abortion. From my point of view, or what I think, is that life is valuable because of consciousness. Consciousness, the subjective experience of reality. We can't define it, really. I mean, great minds have tried to define consciousness and they've been unable to do so. But just because you can't define something with any kind of precision doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. There are lots of natural phenomena that have taken centuries to be able to articulate and pin down and define, but that didn't mean that they didn't exist now, right? Right. Consciousness exists, and I think that it is the most valuable thing because it's through consciousness that we experience the reality around us, and therefore, in a secular, in a non-religious kind of morality, consciousness is the good, the thing that we want to maximize, now isn't it? Now, of course, we can't define between better states of consciousness and lower states of consciousness, although we can agree that such differences in states of consciousness exist. For instance, to give a trivial example, standing in line at the DMV compared to, say, experiencing the Sistine Chapel live and in person, one is misery and the other is ecstasy on a conscious level. We can agree on that, right? But we can agree that somebody who experiences a quote-unquote low consciousness is just as worthwhile as somebody who experiences high consciousness. I mean, we don't make any distinction between those kinds of consciousness, right? Right, of course not. And we also don't distinguish between those who are conscious and those who are momentarily or transitionally unconscious. For example, to give an obvious hypothetical, see, if I were to murder somebody while they are sleeping, I would be charged with murder and I would be condemned. Because even though the person was quote-unquote unconscious, there is the rational and reasonable expectation that that person would wake out of their sleep and be conscious. And so just because somebody happens to be momentarily unconscious doesn't mean that their life is not valuable, because of their ability to experience consciousness. You see my point? Same with somebody who is in a coma, for instance. You can go to jail if you go into some hospital and start stepping on people's oxygen tubes, those people who are in a coma. Of course, because there is the expectation that though they might be in a coma now, there is the hope and the expectation that they will be conscious later. Like, for instance, Sonny von Bülow, for example, the famous heiress who fell into a coma, and the poor lady eventually died, but she was in a hospital in a coma for decades. And there was the expectation that one day she would wake up. Now, of course, we value Sonny von Bülow's life because we expect her one day to wake up out of her coma, just as a person who is currently taking a nap, we value their lives because we expect them to wake up out of their nap any moment now, right? Right. And they will re-experience consciousness. But those people who are in a persistent vegetative state, we as a society have come to the agreement that those people, we might turn off the oxygen tube on them because we believe that those people will never re-experience consciousness. In fact, our whole morality, I mean, the knee-jerk moral reaction is, oh, they finally turned off the machines that was keeping, Jane Doe alive, because even though her brain was severely damaged and she would never wake out of the coma, the machines were keeping her alive. But we decided to turn off the machines. no prosecutor anywhere is going to go and prosecute the doctors and family who turned off the life support machines on the Jane Doe who is in a persistent vegetative state. See what I'm saying? Because there is the expectation that she will never regain consciousness, and therefore, even though her heart is still beating and she is still breathing, there is the notion that she is no longer alive. You see what I mean? Now, what happens with a fetus? Well, at the point of conception, it's a near certainty that that fetus will eventually experience consciousness. A certainty greater than, for example, Sonny von Bülow re-experiencing consciousness after falling into the coma that she fell into, right? The vast majority of pregnancies end with a child that will experience consciousness. And therefore, the issue becomes, well, she's not, I mean, the fetus is not experiencing consciousness, but so what? The fetus will experience consciousness. And therefore, as a society, we have to be coherent. If we grant that Sonny von Bülow might at some day wake up from her coma and experience consciousness once again, why is it that a fetus that in 97%, 99% of the cases, that fetus from the moment of conception will end up with a child that will experience consciousness? Why is it that Sonny von Bülow's hope that she might re-experience consciousness is more valuable than the fetus's certainty that it will experience consciousness? You see what I'm saying? That's why, from my point of view, aborting a child is aborting a consciousness that is to wake up. You can think of it as a fetus is a person who's in a coma, and in 9 months they're going to wake up. Would you turn off the machine keeping them alive if you knew for a 99% certainty that in 9 months they will wake up? Of course not. You'd be charged with murder, as a matter of fact. See what I mean? Now see, a whole bunch of people say that the rape and incest are reasons to allow abortion. That a fetus that is conceived by way of rape or incest should not be allowed to exist. That is not self-evidently true. Not at all. Why is it that the manner of conception trumps the consciousness of the fetus? The near certainty that that fetus will be a conscious child in 9 months. Why is it that the inevitable, and I'm not belittling the trauma that the mother experiences of having been raped or being the victim of incest, severe, traumatic, horrible, no question. But why is that trauma more important and more valuable than the conscious existence of the fetus that she's carrying in her womb? That's not self-evident. It's not even clear at all. The only case where an abortion would be justified, would be acceptable, would be in the case of an ectopic pregnancy. For those of you who don't know, an ectopic pregnancy is when the fetus, the egg, is inseminated outside of the womb in a woman's body. Usually outside of the fallopian tubes. It's a tragedy because what will happen is as the fetus develops, it will cause all kinds of complications for the mother and will inevitably result in the death of the mother unless the fetus is aborted. And the abortion is such that it will result in the death of the fetus. And so the issue becomes, well, both will inevitably die if the ectopic pregnancy is allowed to go to term. And therefore, the child, the fetus, is sacrificed, is aborted, in order to save the life of its mother. Now, this is a horrible moral calculus, but I think that we can all agree that the death of one, tragic though they may be, is preferable than the death of both, right? Right. And so ectopic pregnancies, in my estimation, are the only reason that an abortion should be allowed. In the case of rape and incest, it is not self-evident at all. It's not clear at all. What are we talking about? You know? I mean, yeah, sure, rape is horrible. I'm not doubting that. But the elimination, the destruction, the abortion of a person's ability to experience consciousness is worse, is much worse. And rape and incest, though horrible though those two assaults are, do not grant justification to abort a fetus and snuff out the consciousness that will result, that will inevitably result. I mean, quite frankly, we could look at it from a simple perspective. You know, two wrongs don't make a right, okay? Now, is rape or incest awful? Yeah, but, you know, murder is just as bad. And to murder a fetus just because it was conceived in rape or incest it does not justify murder. Two wrongs do not make a right. The fact of the matter is, most abortions, the vast majority of abortions, 90% of abortions plus, they are carried out because the pregnancy is inconvenient to the woman. Inconvenient to the woman, be it for economic reasons or social reasons. But it's not really because of rape and incest. Those abortions are extraordinarily rare. It's not because most pregnancies are ectopic. Again, those abortions are exceedingly rare. 95% or plus, something extraordinarily high, is just because of the convenience of the woman, her preference. Daisy Cousins has a very good video on the stats about this particular issue. I'll link it in the description below. But I just wanted to put out this argument about abortion, because the follow-up video to this one is going to be very, very unpleasant, and it's going to make me look like a hypocrite, I'm sure. But I just wanted to make my moral stance here. And then in the second video, I'm going to talk about the practicality of abortion and pregnancy. And I'm going to look to a lot of people like the biggest fucking hypocrite. And in the third video of this little mini-series, we'll try to square this circle.